This week on Inside Olympia, she is Washington State University's 12th president and the first woman to hold the role. We meet President Betsy Cantwell. What are her priorities for the state's land-grant university? How does she plan to address enrollment declines and budget cuts? That and much more when we sit down with President Cantwell for the full hour.
From the TVW studio, it's Inside Olympia with host Austin Jenkins.
Welcome to Inside Olympia and Happy New Year. Both of Washington's landmark universities have new presidents. This week, we meet one of them. Betsy Cantwell became the first woman to lead Washington State University when she took the helm last April. She takes the lead at Washington's land-grant university at a time of declining enrollment, budget challenges, and cuts to federal research dollars. So how does she plan to steer WSU's future? And what is her message to state lawmakers as the 2026 session gets underway? Joining me now, and for the full hour, is WSU President Betsy Cantwell. Welcome to the program. Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. It's really a pleasure to be here. I like talking about WSU.
Well, we have the full hour to do so. Before we launch in, here's a little bit of background on President Cantwell. Prior to joining WSU, she was president of Utah State University. She's also held leadership roles at the University of Arizona and Arizona State, where she oversaw and grew research portfolios. Previously, President Cantwell worked in the national security sector at the Lawrence Livermore, Oak Ridge, and Los Alamos National Laboratories. She holds an MBA from the Wharton School, earned her doctorate in mechanical engineering at Berkeley, and graduated from the University of Chicago for her undergraduate work. Here are some fast facts about WSU. The university is 136 years old this year, has 6 campuses, 11 academic colleges, and extensions in all 39 counties. It has about 21,000 undergraduates, 4,200 graduate and professional students, and more than 2,000 faculty. It also boasts nearly $400 million in annual research funding. So, with that background on you and the university, let's start with your path to this presidency and to Washington State University. Why did you want this job?
I think it's important to answer that question by telling everyone why I moved from national security into higher education.
I was thinking of maybe starting at the beginning of your resume.
And that really answers all the questions.
So let's go back.
So I have 5 children, and I was touring Arizona State University with one of them, number 4, and I met the president there. This is a much longer story when you tell it with all its glory, but and then went home. She decided to go to ASU. But about 3 weeks later, the president called me and said, look, I can tell that you're a person who believes in serving a mission that's relevant to the future of the United States. And I want to convince you that higher education is the most important national security mission that we have. And proceeded as only he can do to convince me of that. And so I retain my own version of that, which is that the role that we play in taking actually all age people, but primarily younger people, and delivering to them the ability not just to get a job, but to think and be creative and own their own intellectual life is a core underpinning of the democratic republic that we are now in the midst of asking a lot of questions about. And what we do, to me, is more important than ever. Now, having said that, my background was really, really big research programs, so it made sense to start there. But
to be clear, it sounds like you were, to some extent, you may be an accidental university president. This was not the career path
no,
you were on.
It was absolutely not in any of, until I had been in academia for a while and watched the state of disruption that was already happening. And I had been, national security is easy to say, but all of the things that I had done, we change our mind as a nation about what our national security most important goals are, not every 4 years, but pretty regularly. So I had been through a lot of disruptive mindset, and it looked kind of similar to me. That was more associated with technology, which is not mentioned all that much, but is a huge driver for the kinds of changes that we see in higher ed, not just because of how we might teach, but because of the endpoints that our students have to be able to meet in order to get a job. And then the narrative around higher education, frankly, in my mind at least, ignores the data about the value of a four-year degree, and has been questioning that value for at least a decade.
And I want to come back to that because
Yeah.
it does seem like a core and central sort of narrative right now is the value.
It is a
of-
core, but it's also, you know, if you, I'll say one thing and then we can come back to the details. Since 2014, for the public universities in the U.S., and this is absolutely true for WSU, our cost per student has come down, meaning what you pay has come down, even as what I call the sticker price of the tuition level has gone up. And that's because, for a number of reasons, but the bottom line is that there's an awful lot of financial aid that's available. So about more than half of our students graduate with no debt. And that's not unusual in the U.S. now. The narrative is that it's getting worse, and
Right.
it's
And that
actually
students are so
materially getting
burdened.
better.
Right. Okay, well, we can come back
we'll
to that.
come back
I want
to
to come
that.
back to you for a moment, just because, again, your path seems so unique and interesting because you didn't get your PhD and become a professor, correct?
I
you
did
went
not.
into the national
I
labs
did,
and had
I
this.
did.
So what was the lure to that world and that field before you were convinced to sort of hop over to the university?
So why
deployment?
national labs?
Yeah.
First of all, the missions are, if you, if you have a passion for this country at sort of in whatever way, and you're a tech nerd like I was, I don't know if I still am, but I certainly was, there's nothing like it. The number of things that you get to do, the material importance of what you get to work on, the bleeding edge of science and technology, all combined, is really, really compelling. And I never really had a bad moment. But I reached a point where I just felt like, you know what, I can do more. It looks harder to me, and it is. I would say the number, I call them vectors of disruption coming at higher ed right now, especially with this federal administration, is so material. This is a fundamentally disrupted enterprise, fundamentally. I find that invigorating.
Because why?
Because it's challenging to think about how to maintain, in a land grant sense, we were created for core mission that has not varied. We were created to make available to those that want it a college education. So to be the opposite of elite. But to be as excellent so that we could not only educate, but deliver amazing research to the places that we lived. And in the day, it was agricultural, really mechanization, and then the mechanical arts, really. What was engineering doing in that industrial revolution sense? We live in pretty much the same place right now as a nation. That was the end of the Civil War. This is the beginning of a real questioning of a lot of the aspects of the nation.
So do you see it as an opportunity then for reinvention or an opportunity to just reestablish the value proposition?
No, I think the value proposition remains whole. I think what needs to be reinvented is how we do what we do. And it's very hard. We are in the middle of disruption, right? So it's very hard to say, I know what we will look like in 10 years. But we do have underway, for instance, a visioning process that says, what functions do you think we need to serve in 10 years? Not how are we going to do that, but obviously, I think, we still need to educate. We also still need to deliver research for problems of interest to the state of Washington, most of which, honestly, are globally relevant problems.
Let me loop back around here. What was it then to sort of carry on the journey here? What inspired you to want to come to WSU, to leave your position as president of Utah State University at this juncture?
It's a good question, because I did leave after not a very long time, but I've been an admirer of WSU for a long time. So Washington State University has been a partner with the Pacific Northwest Laboratory for a long
PNNL,
time.
yeah.
When I was in the National Laboratory System, I worked with PNNL and faculty members at WSU a fair amount.
Do you have any Washington State connection prior to this?
I don't, although I do have
Not
a...
that that's a
No, I
litmus test
no,
for the job. I'm just
for
curious.
the state of Washington, no, I don't. I do have a daughter who's about to finish a PhD in chemical engineering at WSU.
Oh, great.
So she's in finishing, well, she'll finish her 4th year in
So she was just
June.
telling you, Mom, this is a great university. You should come be the president.
Well, actually, so I knew let me just say, I knew a lot about the experience of graduate students, which is always challenging because you're kind of somewhere between an employee and an undergraduate student, but you are neither. But I also knew a lot about our facilities. I knew a lot about our faculty. And I kept saying to the headhunters, I haven't been at Utah State that long. I should probably wait a little bit longer. And then I said to myself, look, Betsy, you're never going to get this chance again. They're going to hire someone who will be there for a decade. This is it. So I decided to at least have a discussion with the hiring committee, and that really is all she wrote.
Yeah. What's the significance or importance of being the first woman to lead this
I
university?
had no idea until after I was hired. Not that
12 presidents, 136 years, and no women until
and
you.
no women, which boggles the mind in a state like Washington, which has been very female-friendly for a long time. And I knew Anamari Cauchi, and it just didn't occur to me. I knew the last 2 presidents were men, but honestly, it didn't until someone said, you're the first woman president. So I am happy to represent, but really, I am 100% sure I was not selected because I'm female.
Of course.
So
It is historically notable, though, and it's also notable that our 2 large research-based universities both have new presidents at around the same time.
we do, and I will give, the one shout out I'll give to Robert Jones is that he's a land-grant guy in many ways. He understands our mission so that when I talk to him about how we will partner, he understands what our job is in the state, which is really lovely.
What is the... So maybe we should also just talk a little bit. You've used the term land grant. I have. What does it mean? Remind us of the sort of history here and the structure that a state like Washington had, where we've got the University of Washington in Seattle and WSU in Pullman.
That's really common. The University of Washington campus would be the one that had the original medical school, which is true in Washington, and that's true for most of our states. And then the land grant was either in a rural area in order to bring, really, I think, the sort of mechanization that was transforming an awful lot of the country to rural areas.
You needed the researchers for agriculture.
Yeah, and
to
that's
have
the
a
whole
place to do
purpose
their
of the
work.
cooperative extension program is to, and sort of that research, that cooperative extension program has extended well beyond agricultural research to healthcare research and anything that the communities in all of our counties might need. And you will recall that each of our cooperative extension offices is partially supported by the county in which it resides. So they're very
So it's like
specific
a
to those county needs.
It's a county extension office with a WSU component, or the other way around?
Well, it's a WSU extension office with a county component.
Okay,
Really
interesting.
driving the focus. For instance, the extension office that's in wine country really serves an awful lot of the wine growing and wine making, things like that.
Right. I'm also going to come back to the WSU footprint in the state and the structure and how you're thinking about that. But because we're sitting in Olympia, we are recording this on the first day of the legislative session, in the first week of a short session. You're obviously here for a reason, and it's again a tight budget situation. I imagine interacting with and making the case for higher education is going to be your priority for the next 60 days. What is your message to legislators? What kinds of conversations have you been having since you arrived?
So my first priority message is because as we look at the proposed budget, WSU is rather uniquely targeted for a higher percentage cut.
By the way, this would be the governor's supplemental
Correct. That's
budget
correct.
proposal that came out in December.
Yes.
Yep. That kind of everybody's using now as a template.
So that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
What's the number in terms of dollars or
Well, so
percentage?
for WSU, and UW, there's a 3.2% cut. And for every other element of higher education in the state, it's a 1.5, I think, or 4. That doesn't make sense to me from the following, and this is probably part of the message, is that WSU and UW, the research-intensive institutions, are historically far more economically focused drivers of economic growth.
So like GDP.
So like GDP for a state.
Yeah.
And when you do some version of harm to that, it will typically take you about 10 years to rebuild that, should you choose to do so in the future. So like lots of things, research is a really great example, but it's also true on a departmental level, on an academic level. If you take something away that's been worked on for a long time and you later decide maybe that wasn't the best idea in the world, it takes some time, some considerable time to build it back up. So my first portion is it does not make sense to me to
hit the four-year research institutions hard or double, basically.
well, actually, just the research intensive, yes. So just UW and WSU. The other thing that's happening for WSU is that we've been part of a right now, as written, a change to the way that our self-insurance is paid, and that would cost us about $7 million this year, retroactive to July 1st, and then another 9 or 10 next year. So we're really
So is that a double, kind of on top of the cuts? You
correct,
have this
that is on top
the
of
spend.
So it's
that's
about
coming.
20 million total now.
What doesn't seem like a huge number for a large university.
Well, so let's do that. So $1.3 billion total throughput. 450 million of that is research. So that really doesn't touch the teaching and learning enterprise or operations. Those dollars really pay for what they are written into their grant. So you take that off the top. Then you've got basically state allocated budget dropping by 20 million. There's a certain amount of activity that covers, and you've got tuition, which is never going to rise as fast as we are dropping the state budget. This is something that many universities went through much more challenging than we did in the financial crisis of 2008 to 2010. And they're down around, many in the US are down around 5 to 6% total support from the state. We are still at 20%. But when you take 20 million off the top, and we have already in the past 4 years seen a $52 million cut over those 4 years. So we're at the 70 million, and we've cut every piece of administration or operations that we can. And we have a lot of campuses. We are now looking at programmatic cuts.
You are looking at programmatic
We are looking
cuts.
at
So what
programmatic
does that start to look like? And again, as you're thinking about conversations you're having or will be having with legislators,
Yeah,
how are you going to articulate
delicate conversation, but when you look at programmatic cuts, you have to ask the question, what is it that we could do, we would not choose to do without, but we could do without, and whether it's on an academic department. It's typically, again, we're at the operations level where you're taking your own trash out anywhere you are in the system. I mean, there's an awful lot of, you wouldn't run an institution that way. That's already happened. When I got here in April, I cut probably 20 different administrative positions and just combined things. There's only so much you can do of that. We will ask the questions, do we need all of our programs at all of our extension offices? Now, those are not teaching and learning programs, but they are, many of them, and every one of them is deeply important to the county that they're in. But something is going to hurt somebody.
And you're saying something has to give.
And something has to give. We are at that point.
Well, I think I could imagine a lawmaker might say, yeah, but we're in an era of declining enrollments. You can't absorb these cuts, or, don't cuts kind of make sense on paper?
So, universities are interesting, but we run little cities. So, and any mayor will understand that. So we have pretty much fixed costs in infrastructure, in energy costs, which, as everybody knows, have been skyrocketing, in insurance costs, and we have a large number of fixed costs to run the institutions that we run. Now, if we said, you know what, we're just going to go all online, I don't think our students in the state of Washington, they'd go somewhere else because they don't want, I mean, plenty do, and we serve plenty of fully online students who get their degrees with us. But most of our students want some sort of in-person experience, whether they're commuter students or whether they come and live in a dorm.
So your bottom line message to legislators, I mean, they're going to be and they're going to also say we have many parts of the budget that are quite protected.
They absolutely are.
You're kind of hanging out there vulnerable in higher ed. What will you be? What will you be asking for?
If we look at the state of Washington as assessing the higher education sector with a certain value proposition, my bottom line is it makes no sense to cut some more than others. Being larger does not mean that your cost per student is better or worse, and in many cases it's better, but it does not mean you have a pot of money somewhere, and so you are literally cutting something. You don't have money to fill that gap, you're literally cutting something.
I know.
And because we're larger means that those things are somehow less important doesn't make sense to me.
I know that the university is making the case for its economic impact, including $4 billion in statewide impact, total economic activity. You talk about a $12 return on every $1 spent by the
Correct.
state, the jobs and wages that come with this, obviously the research and innovation, which kind of scales and has a ripple effect, and then what you're providing in terms of a workforce pipeline. So we'll move on from that just because there's so much I want to get to. And I do want to ask you about how you've come in and you've got this enterprise that is not just contained to Pullman and one campus. It's statewide, as we've discussed. How have you thought about, and what is the governance shift that you're implementing, which it sounds like is maybe a bit of a flipping of the script compared to your predecessors?
I don't know. You tell me. The way I think about it and the way it appears to work going forward. So our academic enterprise, meaning the colleges with deans, are on the Pullman campus and the Spokane campus. So those provide the nexus, the flagship nexus within the system. They serve all of our campuses.
It's the hub.
It is the hub. And Spokane happens to be our healthcare part of that.
And that's where the
hub.
medical school is.
But we eliminated the chancellor of the Spokane campus and brought them under the provost, which makes all the sense in the world because they are really academic enterprises, the three colleges that are there. And then every other campus, not including online, was really created, and I've done enough digging to be fairly certain that this is correct, was created because that place, that region, really wanted a four-year degree granting institution in order to be more available for people there who, for whatever reason, didn't want to uproot and go live in Pullman for a while. I call them place-bound. Either they were already working, had family, all kinds of things, and to serve the workforce. So Everett, really rapidly growing need for workforce. Vancouver, very similar. And Tri-Cities has both unique needs to serve some of the unique workforce needs of the lab and the Hanford site, but also very unique workforce needs in all of the food-related enterprises that are, distribution. There's an enormous amount of very unique corporate entities in the Tri-Cities area. So serving the people and the workforce needs locally. So that's what the three regional campuses are. And then Global was really originally created because there were some people that just couldn't even do that. And we are seeing probably our largest percentage growth in the online campus, and view the online campuses and the rest of our in-person physical campuses as merging more and more as we learn more about the value proposition of online learning.
So you're calling this, reformatting or thinking about how you organize this this enterprise, one WSU.
Yeah.
What does that mean to
So
you? And when you talk to the people who make up this university and all of its components, how are you pitching this?
We talk about that from the perspective of how do we operate these multiple physical entities in a way that allows us to be most efficient and most effective. So we already have the academic side, which means the deans are all in Pullman or Spokane, and they manage faculty that are elsewhere. That's not an unusual model across the U.S. And that we may have business services or communications or HR resident in one location serving multiple locations. That's what in the business world is kind of called a matrix management model. We have been pretty focused on having everything that's needed in an Everett or a Vancouver or a Spokane. So we're really taking a look at how matrix management can work for us. And I would be remiss, because it comes out my mouth every day, in the era of AI tools for businesses, we would be remiss if we weren't taking this opportunity to ask, how can the advent of really functional artificial intelligence business tools be used by the university in order to manage our many physical locations, and that includes the cooperative extension offices more effectively and efficiently.
What does that start to look like? How do you begin
I don't know, but I'll tell you how we're getting there. We started, I think in June, what we're calling the WSU system redesign process. And it starts with what I said earlier, which is at every location and for every stakeholder group, what do we need to look like? What functions do we need to serve in a decade to be relevant to where you're going, either where your community is going or where your company's going? We held, 10 or 15 different very large community engagement town halls. We've done surveys of corporations, community members, faculty, students, and staff. And so that in about probably 8 months will result in some options, and we will make action plan decisions with regard to those options. How do we optimize what we provide to the state of Washington by having our WSU presence in the state in a decade? It will take about a decade to change radically, meaning if we said we're going to do, I want to make up something that will never happen, because we're already in a general education redesign process, but how do we get from where we are to a decade from now? Let's say we're getting rid of one department and starting a new one. That takes about 8 years, because you have to design it and build it and get the faculty, teach out the students that are already in the old one, and then when you start the new one, they've got 4 years before they graduate. So you're seeing those results in a decade, and that's why we picked that horizon.
Okay. We do need to take a break, so when we return, we continue our interview with WSU President Betsy Cantwell, back after this.
TVW takes you back in time with historic Washington. Looking at the people, the places, the history, and the beauty of Washington's past.
Welcome back to Inside Olympia. Joining me once again is WSU President Betsy Cantwell. And I want to ask you about what we've been hearing about a lot in recent months, which is cuts to university-based research being made by the Trump administration, and what the impacts are. We talked about $400 million plus in annual research dollars, but what's the trajectory? What are the real-world impacts here?
Well, we're like everything, we are doing our best guessing, because this administration is nothing if not mercurial. But what we see is that about 10% of our research has been just flat out cut for a variety of reasons or no reason offered. We also see that the traditional approach to requesting proposals, writing proposals, getting them reviewed, and getting money has slowed down substantially. On the other side, so I'll talk about this, so that's affecting us, and it will affect us. I have projected anywhere from 15 to 20% of our federal research revenue may fall off.
Wow.
On the other hand, there are other areas that this administration, and this is pretty common, have really said we're going to go all in on, that we are actually really good at. Rural medicine.
Yeah,
big deal.
Big announcements in the last few weeks on that.
Nuclear energy. We're very, very good in that area. So there are, I think we uniquely will see a 2 to 3 year decline. We're at about 450 million for 2025, maybe to 400 million. And if we do it right and we really pay attention to the needs that this administration articulates, combined with what the companies in Washington are really focused on as well for their own growth, and some of those really new areas like AI or quantum, then I think we've got a 2 or 3 year downturn.
Do you think you have the kind of infrastructure in place to leverage some of that?
We do. We actually have remarkable, let me just use nuclear energy we have remarkable nuclear research infrastructure. We are the only entity in the state of Washington that trains nuclear reactor operators. But we have nuclear chemistry labs. This is all from the 60s and 70s when we were doing an awful lot of work with the Pacific Northwest Lab on nuclear energy. As it comes back, we still have a lot of very viable infrastructure with which to do that. And that's true in other areas as well.
I want to go back to enrollment trends. University of Washington is drawing record enrollment. Your university has experienced declines.
We have.
I think by more than 4,500 students since 2019, an 18% drop.
Yeah, although the last 2 years we have flattened out. So
Flattened out,
it was
okay.
really between 19 and 23.
Maybe accelerated by COVID or affected. to some
I
extent?
personally have looked, so that was the narrative when I got here, sort of. But you know what really did it was the dissolution of the Pac-12.
Oh.
And so we haven't talked about athletics, and I'm happy not
that's
to
on my
because I
list.
spend a lot
I
of my
bet you
time
do.
on it.
But if I don't
there is some
bring it up, I'll be
indication
remiss.
that it has real meaning to the people of Washington.
Yeah.
Now, the other real difference, there are many, but between us and UW is that we are somewhere between 10 and 15% on any given year out-of-state students. We almost exclusively serve students from the state of Washington. 85% of our students, our undergraduates, are from the West Side, so which is where most of the people in Washington live. So
Well,
they come to us and they come back here.
It's very clear that you still believe in the value proposition around a four-year degree. We hear a lot about
Yep.
alternative pathways. I frequently interview the state school superintendent, Chris Rakedahl, at this very desk, who talks about giving kids coming up in the K-12 system a range and array of options. And as a parent of high schoolers, I think about this, and people are questioning, you talked about the percentage of students who are not graduating with debt, but we hear about the cost of a four-year degree, the debt that kids might be saddled with, and whether it's going to ultimately pay off. And it sounds like you still very much believe in this.
I do. I think
and have the stats to back it up, I guess.
The data, and it gets examined, year on year on year, is that you will be, on average, I'm sure everybody knows somebody for whom this is not true, but on average, you will be economically, in your lifetime, better off if you get a four-year degree. And as a result, your family, in particular your children, whether or not they go to college, will be economically better off than those whose parents did not go to college. We also know that since 2014, I think I said this earlier, but the overall cost of going to WSU has dropped. That means the actual amount you pay, not tuition, which is indeed inching up year on year, but the actual cost that you pay. You are very, 56...
Are you referencing the sort of the sticker price, and then when you subtract from that the aid that students are
Correct.
getting?
Or waivers, or there's a whole host of, it is complicated. I think that's part of our narrative problem, but basically there's a wedge of stuff for everybody that comes in and says you either you never pay any tuition. 35% of our students never pay any tuition. 56% graduate without debt, and the average debt is south of $20,000. Total debt that a graduate graduates with for WSU is south of $20,000 total.
So what is the plan?
So that's
Go ahead.
a challenge. It's a narrative challenge.
What is the plan to try to build back? Besides the new Pac-12, what's the plan to build back?
Well, the new Pac-12 is a whole thing,
Yeah,
yes.
we'll talk about that in a moment.
So building back, I think, is
Or can you? I mean, there's also, declining number of people having kids, and fewer kids in public schools, and there's a sort of a demographic
There's a demographic
thing.
cliff. But it's unclear exactly how that's going to happen in Washington. Very unclear. But two or three things. We would really like to encourage more of so less than 50%, significantly less, of the high school graduates in Washington go to college. That's actually, I don't think anybody would say that's appropriate.
It's also surprising, I think, when people hear that, because
We're
we
such
think of ourselves as
yes, it
such a
shocked me.
tech-based economy.
Shocked me because we import an enormous number of people to fill the jobs that we don't fill because we don't get enough of our high school graduates. So we have room there. We also know that at least part of our job, land grants are public service universities. Part of our job is to be available when someone wants that degree, not just for the 17 to 25-year-olds who are just coming in and they're going to live in our dorms.
You've talked about the tradespeople who decide, okay, I did this, and maybe I'm, worn out now, and I want something else and want to come back into that environment.
And so there are plenty of examples, but we're really thinking hard about two other things. One is our completion rate is not where we'd like it to be. So our enrollment will stay higher if we keep more of the kids who come. Our first-year enrollment is inching up. It has been for a couple years. We need to keep those kids. We need to give them what they expected to get when they came to us in terms of some version of a degree. And then the people, they often won't be kids, they'll be adults, who want to come back and get a degree. My goal, and we are not there at the moment, is that that's a friction-free process. It does not feel hard. It feels like you get credit for past learning, you get credit for when you went to school for some period of time, if you stopped out to come back. You can make it work for yourself in the situation that you have.
How much do you think, kind of going to this 10-year visioning, that you have to maybe not reinvent, but retool what you're offering and how you're teaching it?
I think significantly personally. I think significantly. And I also think that a lot of the answers are going to depend on what companies in Washington say. Two things. What companies say they expect to be doing in 10 years, what's going to be different, what's going to be the same, and how many new people.
It's interesting you say this, though, because we really hear this from the community and technical college community about trying to match what the employers and the economy needs. I don't talk to four-year university presidents perhaps as often, but would you have said this a decade ago?
I would have, but that's just me.
Do you think that you are unique then among four-year university presidents, research university presidents, to be talking about the need to talk to the employers and find out what they need and try to?
I think everybody's doing that right now. At least certainly the land grants across the board. I mean, I work with other land grant presidents a lot, are all working with employers regarding on the bachelor's side.
Right. Do you get
professional degree.
Do you get pushback from the faculty, from the liberal arts, and
I don't.
Saying,
I don't.
But
and
there's a value proposition here that goes beyond just
I think
student A, job B.
Correct. Much more than student A, job B. It is what kind of person do we deliver that our graduates are enormously valuable, right? They come from the West Side largely, but they're all quite employable. I talked to I talked to Boeing the other day. They employ an enormous number of Cougs. They like us. Why? It's not an engineering degree. You really do have to have a four-year degree anyway, but they like the kind of product we get. So I think our faculty, to go back to that for just a minute, have been at a land grant for as long as they've been at a land grant because they believe in the public service mission. That, there's a lot of things you can do when faculty have historically been pretty fungible around the whole U.S. They're with us. Not because we pay the most, but because we offer a sense of mission and value that means something to them. So when we are talking to companies, that makes all the sense in the world to them. That's sort of an endpoint that they hope their students get to.
Let me switch gears and just ask you about, you talked about the environment that you're working in with the federal administration and not necessarily knowing where that's headed on a day-to-day basis. But what about just more generally the climate that we're in this country, politically, in terms of sort of the civic discussion, and the issues of free speech, of course, have have come up on campuses across the country in recent years. You just came from Utah, where Charlie Kirk was assassinated on a college campus. And I'm just wondering how you're thinking as a university president about creating a safe space, but also a space that respects free speech, and how you manage through that in these times. Can't be easy.
That is a really loaded set of questions. I will say first to start that Charlie Kirk had been on our campus at WSU 3 months before.
I almost
he
said
was at
that. I
Utah
was trying
Valley
to. I thought he
University,
had.
and
Yeah.
it was a pretty big nothing burger in all senses. Lots of curiosity, but not a crowd quite as large, and just we were as conscious of security as anyone can be, and I think it's emblematic of the kind of place that we are at Washington State University, that it was not protested that Charlie Kirk was there, nor was there a whole bunch of people really keen to go hear what Charlie Kirk said, because they all had places to go, they had jobs to go to, they had work to do. As I said, 56% of our kids are first gen. That means they've got to get a job after they graduate. But on the kind of the swirl around free speech and what and where do we as institutions take a stance? I am firmly in the camp of what's called institutional, sort of, as an institution, we do not declare as an institution, and in that sense, as president, I am the institution. We create a platform where everybody can feel like they can at least speak their mind. Now, is that safe? Does that engender a feeling of safety? I have also said to numerous students, it is not necessarily a safe moment. And it would be useful for you to think about whether or not an institution that says it can create safety for you can actually do that, versus we will talk about everything that's going on, and we will create an environment where you can be the human being that you expect to be. And let's start there. Which I still think is the right approach for this increasingly fraught moment, where many people don't dare say things on one side or the other for fear of how they will be received and treated.
What about the fact that the administration has gone after funding at particular universities, mostly private universities, but do you...
Well, they went after UC Berkeley and
right.
UCLA. I mean, really, those institutions were targeted for interesting reasons.
But do you now, as a president of a state university in this era, does this keep you up at night? Are you having to think and worry about, are we going to be next? Will something happen and now we'll be the target?
I suppose I could, but I'll tell you what keeps me up more at night is can I ensure that this institution exists to provide the public service that we were created to create in a decade. And that has this combination of financial challenges plus the federal landscape, the state landscape, the state's perspective on higher education. It is, and you're going to have to talk to me about athletics because I think this all comes down. It is a big function in the modern world of the narrative, the honest, true, fact-based narrative that we can not just create but continuously talk about, and then make that real for the students that come to us and the people that come for solutions to their problems, the people who need the research that we do. Awful lot of the work that we do is community-focused.
So how does this connect back to athletics?
So the real connector that the way I connect them anyway, is that much as there are increasing vectors of disruption coming at higher ed every day, that is also happening to college athletics. And some of them are not the same. In fact, many of them are not the same. And so we have two very disrupted components of the university. It is athletics that gets the higher level of attention. That has been true for quite some time, but it's really important for us to acknowledge that college athletics is still the it's been called the front porch, which I sort of don't love, but it is the narrative through which many people access the value of Washington State University. So they come to us through an athletics narrative and then learn about what we do with our students or with research. And that's just true for lots and lots of
So
people.
in some respects, it can be a calling card or a way of marketing the university.
I would say it
branding.
represents the brand, who
Yeah,
we are.
yeah.
And everybody knows that money is changing everything, and it really is
and
kind
it's
of the
being-
legal perspective of what student athletes are and what they represent. There is so much money in professional athletics and so much money in college athletics now. It's definitely swirling the waters.
Yeah, and I don't follow it closely, but all of the transfer portal stuff and the athletes moving around, the paying athletes now, and how are you viewing this disruption and what it means?
So pretty simply, it is a lot of disruption, and I think I've said many times that occupies a fair amount of my mind share, not necessarily my time, but my mind share, because it is so disruptive and it is so important to the future of WSU. But
And is that from a revenue standpoint?
well, yes, but from the standpoint of what is that brand and that value of having, a good football team mean in the secondary, tertiary, quaternary, I think that's a word, levels of revenue generation, including, we saw it affected our enrollment, and there are lots of university stories about, having a winning football year affecting enrollment, lots and lots, and a losing football year affecting enrollment. And there's an awful lot of deal structure thinking going into college football in particular, but college athletics right now, that was not here 3 to 4 years ago. The way I think about it is we are in a conference that's unlike any other conference. It is really a startup, even though it's going to have sort of some similar branding to with the old Pac-12. It's a startup. It can be, as startups can be, inordinately exciting. I like to say, if you wear Cougar Crimson, you are a founder in this startup. We happen to have some nice facilities paid for by the last guys, but in the 3 to 4 year time frame, every media deal for all the conferences in the U.S. is going to start churning. And I think what happens then, anyone that tells you they know is lying, but it could, in my mind, look as disruptive as the last time we went through conference realignment. And so my goal for WSU is that we have proven that we are interesting and that we should not be, not just left behind, but that we have a lot to bring to the table in the next round, whatever's next in college athletics. I think we can absolutely get there, and I think the Pac-12 can get there as well, by really embracing that we are a startup and we have a startup story to tell, and that compete and win component of a startup story is really compelling.
You have a new football coach, you've got the new Pac-12. What would you preview for next season? I mean, what do you think the near future holds?
I mean, obviously, I played a role in hiring Coach Moore, and I have a lot of faith in him. One of the things that really compels me, he's a child of Eastern Washington. He's got a SEC experience. He's a remarkable coach. Is his approach to the young men on the football team is as almost as a faith leader. And these young men imagine what it's like to be, they're in the churn just like everybody else, only they're young.
That's the spotlight.
And they are under
pressure.
So much pressure. And so much money is being just flung in front of them. I want them to remember, whether they've been with us for a year or 4 years, that the experience they got at WSU enhanced their ability to be better humans. And so when they think about us at any point in the future, they think about that Coug experience as valuable for them. And I see Coach Moore as really being able to deliver that.
So if you're going to take in a game at WSU, what's your sport of choice?
Oh, so it's not really fair.
It's not fair. That's a really unfair question.
It's not really fair.
It's just going to get you in trouble.
It might, but I do enjoy a good basketball game.
Yeah. Okay.
The question for football, the hard thing is that when I'm at a football game, I don't really get to watch the game. There's just a ton
You're
of
working.
things. I am working
Yeah.
nonstop.
Right.
Basketball, you're sitting in a seat
Yeah.
because there's none of the other falderall in a basketball stadium, so I can actually watch.
No
the game.
suites?
Not some stadiums have suites, but it's actually not that common.
Yeah. See, yeah.
You want to keep that noise level up?
Right. So just the last couple of minutes, let's sort of think about the future here, and sort of short term and longer term. You're in this sort of permanent austerity,
yes.
right? Kind of
Yeah.
era, and fresh dollars aren't going to necessarily be coming to you. So
Can I say something about that? Because fresh dollars might come to us if we can do what many other universities learned to do during the financial downturn, which is find alternative revenue streams. Right now, most of those options are prohibited by law in the state of Washington. But if we were viewed
what's an example?
taking land that you have authority over and monetizing it as opposed to just using it for farming.
What about tuition caps and limiting tuition growth? Because obviously that is a break, and it's not something that's super flexible. You don't have the power to say, well, they cut me 3%, so I'm going to raise tuition 3%.
Well, actually, that's what we're expected to do. I mean, I think everybody knows, at least for the 4 years.
Is that how it?
So we don't get full coverage for our pay increases from the state. We only get 55% of that. We're expected to cover the other 45% with increase in tuition.
And do you have that? Do you have that power then? How
We
much
have
of it-
to request it through the regents, but yes, we do.
So would you anticipate that if
Well, we don't have any other sources. So when I bring up alternative revenue streams, I'm like,
You're
you are
trying to
going
think
to
about
hear from
something
me.
besides
I'm going to say,
tuition.
you know what, we have to have some alternative revenue streams besides state allocation, which is going down, and we cannot raise tuition at the same level as state allocation is dropping. We just can't do that.
Right.
We can't do, and so we can't manage state drop in revenue on the backs of our students. We have to find alternative revenue streams, and it is possible to do that. It is possible.
how quickly?
Good question. Probably not in a year, but I'd love to see some options on the table in front of the regents or the legislature within the next 2 or 3 years. Certainly, one will be sort of infrastructure, real estate, land focused, because we are a land grant and we have land. But we could imagine monetizing a whole host of the facilities that we have around the state in different ways, if we had the authority to do that. Third party, which is a classic, but third party approaches to building as opposed to bearing all of the bond debt ourselves.
How do we measure, just a couple minutes left, the
Yeah.
success of a public university president?
Well, that's a really great question, because historically there have been all these, you build new buildings and you get things named after yourself and you bring in, $200
money.
million of new money and maybe donations. But my criteria is that when let's say I'm here 10 years, which is my goal, when we look back, and I do have to take really solid vacations every year. When we look back, we as a state are really proud of where our university is. We really like the students that come out of our educational system. Our companies feel like they have a true partner, and we are genuinely affecting the economy of
And I
the
really
state.
hear you saying you are essentially launching a 10-year realignment.
Yes. Yes.
That's the key
I think
message
10
here.
years is fast.
But that's the timeline you're thinking about, and
It
the
is.
sort of significance of what you're undertaking here is, this is not
That's
just
true.
caretaking or sort of adjusting. It's, you got to meet the moment. And the
Yes.
challenges are real.
Yes.
Okay. What happens when you go back to Pullman? What is the...
Besides saying hello to my cats,
There
who
you
don't
go.
see me very often.
Yes.
So I am only in Pullman for a day this week, and then I flip right back around and go to the CFP playoff and the board meeting to determine what number of teams we're going to have in the next round.
Okay. A final thought as we close out here?
Yeah. I
about
hope
15
people come and
seconds.
talk to me. I'm still wrapping my head around what we want a true public service sort of higher education enterprise to be in Washington. and why we don't have more appreciation for what we have. But I would love to hear from people.
Okay. Dr. Betsy Cantwell, President Betsy Cantwell, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it. Good luck. Thank you for watching Inside Olympia. We'll see you again next week.